Hello and welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan along with Kathryn Peterson. And as we like to bring you each and every Wednesday, a new episode and centered largely around our industry, the housing industry, but hopefully applicable to those of you in other entrepreneurial channels, because we really do believe that Building Bigger Lives has an impact, an overflow into so many different areas. And it's fun to hear from you when we find out that you're listening, you're following, you're sharing our episodes. So please continue to do that because it helps inspire us to think through the larger lens. And one of the topics that came up today might, at first glance, if you read the title, appear to be very limited to this industry. But I do want to encourage you, listen through it, because what's happening in the housing industry is happening in every industry right now. And what we're going to talk about in terms of the impact of AI as it becomes more and more embedded in the fundamentals and the function of our industry should cause you to ask some of the same questions that we're going to ask today. And I hope you'll stick with us as you go through this episode. But we'll keep it really moving along quickly. And I want to bring my friend Kathryn into the frame. Kathryn, always great to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Good to see you. Absolutely. This is a hot topic on all of the sources and sites, and we're seeing
Yeah.
it in the news really every day. So it's good to break it down again.
It is, and some of us may even have some AI fatigue. You start hearing so much
Mhm.
about AI, it almost seems like, what does this even mean anymore? Here's the article that I read. It was a CNBC post that came out over the weekend, and when I read it, what really hit me was plain and simple that the company Better has now publicly announced their ability to underwrite a mortgage loan in 47 seconds without any human being
Mhm.
in the underwriting process. That should be super interesting to all of us who hear that, whether we are freaked out by it or excited by it or somewhere in the middle. It should interest all of us
Yeah.
because it's something that we've been waiting on for years now. I mean, this has been the
Mhm.
hype for at least 2 years that AI has been public, and I'm sure another five before that in all of the development phases, like it's coming, it's
Mhm.
coming. Well, here we are, Kathryn. And so I'd love to get your take on that. When you saw that article and you maybe read through it just like I did, emotionally, what reaction as a top producer in the mortgage lending industry, so you're deeply embedded in the housing industry, what was your reaction when you read 47 seconds?
So shockingly, I wasn't surprised. I think I thought, yeah, this is kind of what we've been talking about. I, it's a really interesting topic, but I wasn't shocked that it's out there because we've been moving that direction, like you said, for a couple of years. I think depending on the position that you're in the mortgage or housing industry, it can hit you differently. And I definitely want to unpack some of those things with you today.
Yeah, I love that that's your reaction because I think that's a pretty good summary of mine as well. Was not much ado about nothing, but yeah, we knew this was coming. I didn't know if it was coming in March of 2026, but I knew it was coming. And in some ways, you could even push me on that to say, I guess that you could have told me this was going to come sooner, and I would have believed you because
Mhm.
there was a while there where we believed the proliferation of AI was going to accelerate so quickly that it was going to blow our minds. Well, so far, I think it's accelerated at a pace in which I've not yet had my mind blown. I'm keeping up with it, but we may be entering that phase in which this thing really ramps from here. So we'll see. Here's a framework. I'd like to lay this out because I'm not here to promote what Better is doing. I don't think they're alone in this, number one. I think all mortgage companies have some research and development around underwriting as an automated tool. And we've had automated underwriting before AI. And that's one of the things I think
Mhm.
I hope the
Mhm.
audience understands is automated underwriting isn't a new thing at all. I mean, we've seen this for 20 years with desktop underwriting, DULP,
Yeah.
and I
Yep.
don't want to get into language that maybe our audience is like, what did he just say? But the concept isn't new, but the application of AI in it is because it's now not just processing through an algorithm of if this, then that. It's now saying if this, then that. Well, then what? It's figuring out the solution,
Mhm.
not just pointing
Right.
out the gap. That's the real difference of what we see today. So when you think about it in that frame, react to that as well, Kathryn. I mean, you've been using automated underwriting for a long time for your pre-approvals and certainly even in the contract phase. What possibilities does this new phase and development create for folks like you if a company like yours decided to start implementing AI in the underwriting process?
Well, I think some of it is just speed. I mean, that's really what people have used AI for is a second brain on some things, like a problem
Mm,
that they're facing, but it's so fast. And I think that's what can be frustrating for loan officers is we think, oh my gosh, it's been in underwriting for 24 hours. I can't wait another minute because we're all impatient. And if we can release some of that, what does that really look like into the end consumer? So I think that a big, huge part of it is speed, but also great. Then what about my team and what skills do they need to develop to either be able to utilize this or to keep them relevant so that they're thinking through, hey, here's really what I need to do in the world of AI to make sure I still have a career in front of me.
So interesting. I love that you set it up that way. I, of course, want to take an angle on it that maybe expands it just because I think that's what we should be talking about because we're not going to change the fact that automating underwriting has been around a long time and we now have AI embedded in it and it's now going
Yeah.
to create that speed. So everything you said, no argument, agreed. And you are right as well. For the audience that may not, have the peek behind the curtain, Kathryn just, tipped her cards that a lot of lenders understand, which is we often submit files into our underwriting system that we know as the person who put them together, as the loansmith, we crafted this thing. We know this is not a complicated decision, but because there is a certain hierarchy and queue to these files that get put in underwriting, we have to wait. And we have to wait for an answer that in our minds is already either obvious or we've already done the
Yeah.
research and we know it. But because of the way our approval process works, we need a person with that authority and that title to
Hmm.
kind of bless it and give it the approval that it needs. Well, in order for all that to happen, we need speed. And so you're right. Speed is going to be, I think, the upside to this whole thing is we're going to get the speed that we've been waiting for on all of those files that we think that's an obvious answer. This isn't a complicated file. That's an easy answer. But your other part of that answer is the one where I really want to spend a little more time because you're right. There are going to be some nervous Nellies who are thinking, oh my goodness, what does this mean? Is this taking my
Yeah.
job? It's a fair question to ask, but I'm not sure the answer is as simple as that question. I I see this from an angle that says, what if this doesn't change your job at all? What if this doesn't change your skill set at all? What if it simply frees you up to do the job you already have with the skills you already have much more effectively because you're not bogged down by the minutia of a bunch of things that maybe can be done through this speedy
Hmm.
automated service that we have, and suddenly your skills do get better because you're able to actually lean into and spend time with the files that deserve the human experience because they're complicated and we need to spend time with them. What if that happens? Like, is that a possibility that we can convince team members not to be afraid of this, but to actually be excited about it?
I think some, absolutely. I think it depends a little bit on the person and their goals and their vision. So, hey, is this a person who loves those just putting stuff in a file, not necessarily the analytical part, just saying, hey, I'm just going to
Mm,
do this and do this because that's the part that I just lean towards. Or you have the person who's like, hey, what I really love is being able to spend time with a client, working on sales, working
mm.
on some of the more analytical, complicated stuff. So you have both of those. And I think that it's going to delineate people into a few different categories depending on their strengths.
All right, so then let's unpack that. I'll go with your hypothesis. Let's unpack that. So if you're in that first category, if you're a person who maybe just likes the simplicity of your job, like I've got a batting order, sorry, sports analogy again. I've got a checklist of steps that I am responsible to complete in my job. a lead comes in and these series of events happen, and my role suddenly is awakened by that series of steps, and I've got to complete certain steps in that process. And I just like checking boxes. I like putting the same thing in the same order over and over again. Your hypothesis is that person, it's fair to be a little bit nervous because this is exactly what AI is going to be able to do faster,
Yep.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, won't need a vacation, doesn't need emotional support, doesn't need health
Hmm.
insurance.
Right. Right.
So if you're
And
that
oh, but
person, what do we do? How do we help that person?
so I think we have faced this before. So if you remember, there was a point in our mortgage world where things were getting sent, we were doing offshoring, right? Or onshoring. There's lots of things. And all of a sudden, we had a bunch of people who were like, oh my gosh, this is going to totally change stuff. And yes, some of those things are done. Disclosures can be offshored, certain order outs can be offshored. So, certain things. So, we have faced this same question. And I think it's saying, hey, here's some things that you can do. Like, hey, something that offshore wasn't great at is looking through the title commitment to see if there were any actual issues going on. Well, AI might be able to do that, but what are some things that you can train on, learn on that still might be fun for you, but kind of elevate you to the next level of the stuff that you can dig into a little more, and maybe it's a specific topic that you've always been interested in that you want to learn that involves lending. Great, dig into that topic. So you can kind of explore that with your manager, hopefully, too.
Even as you described that, I'm thinking back to many of the folks that supported systems that we had created when I was running the same kind of business that you're running.
Mm-hmm.
It was rare for me to meet someone who said, just leave me alone in this tiny little box. That's all I ever want to do for the rest of my career. Almost
Mm-hmm.
everyone that ever played a support role, from that, lead comes in, or a loan assistant once a contract comes in, to a processor, almost everyone in the food chain that I ever worked with had some aspiration to, I'm doing this job to learn a skill that I can develop so that I can carry it into the next level of the career. It was rare for me to meet someone who didn't have growth aspirations. Almost all
Yeah,
the ones I'm thinking of right now almost were willing to take a job that they didn't really want because it provided them experience toward the job they really did want. So as you were saying that, I'm thinking, maybe the good news for those folks is, here's the good news: you're not going to get stuck in a dead end job. If your aspiration is to learn these skills and move up, this is exactly what this will allow for a person who has that ambition. So be really committed to the acceleration of your learning. Be really committed to the acceleration of your skills and your talents, because this will be the pathway for you to accelerate quickly, because no one's going to want to keep you in a role that an AI tool can do much more effectively and efficiently than you. We're going to need people to move up. And so that could be an exciting thing for ambitious people.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think that there is so much to learn in this industry. Everyone I hire eventually says, I had no idea that there was this much involved in the start to finish of a loan. So I think there's so many different parts of it. And that's what makes this such a great career is you can decide, hey, boy, that closing piece is great. That's the piece that I really want to, dive into more. There's so many options.
Yeah. Funny when you say it that way, the first thought that came to my mind is, I can picture 20 some odd years ago when we were moving into things at that time, like, exciting new breaking technology, like an online loan application.
Right.
This freaked people out. Like, wait a minute, you mean I don't have them come in and meet with me, and we don't interview them, and I don't, key an app while they're sitting there, or maybe I'm even really old school and I'm just going to write everything down and I'll handle the keying it later when they leave. We were freaked out by the online app, but the online application actually opened up some things, just like you said. It allowed us to say, hey, I've already received this information, I've already previewed it, I've already formulated now we get to actually talk about the things that I think are
Hmm.
really important. And that turned out to be a very exciting time. I think it elevated the game. And it's funny. We've lived in a career. You and I have lived in an era of the housing industry in which the promise of technology simplifying things has existed since the day we walked through the door. Everyone has told us that these
Yeah.
new upgraded CRMs and LOS systems and full automation and integration of all the tools was going to make our jobs smoother, make our lives easier. It's been a long time coming, Kathryn. It has really not been as easy as promised. If anything, we've had to become technology experts, understanding how to do things that in the past didn't even occur to us. We've had to become branding
Yeah.
experts to figure out how to market ourselves and position ourselves in a world that's online now instead of in person. And so this is the first time in which I felt some sense of relief of, hey, you mean something's actually going to shorten the timetable on all the mundane stuff that honestly was bogging me down anyway? Call me crazy, but I think this is an exciting day.
Oh, absolutely. And we all have those parts of our job that we do because we have to do that we maybe don't want to do. And the more we can get that off our plate, the better.
Well, I'm a big fan of not spending good energy on prognostication, but rather spending that energy on preparation. So as I look down the corridor of time and think, okay, if AI is here today as an underwriting tool and it's already able to take a percentage, and I don't mean like 3 to 5%. I mean, this is going to take a big chunk of the pipeline that people submit, and it's going to take time off the plate immediately, and that's going to free up time for other things. My first thought is this: if I'm willing to look out in the corridor of time, do I think that borrower applications are getting simpler or more complicated? And what I mean by that is when we look at where a borrower's income is coming from, am I seeing more W-2 people or more people with side hustles and all kinds of K1s and all kinds of, I mean, it feels to me like the world is getting a little more complicated,
Hmm.
which tells me right there, I'm going to have more capacity to serve those folks. So my first reaction is let's get excited. If you're a professional problem solver in the housing industry, and I don't care if you're on the real estate side or the lending side, this is going to allow you to do that version of your job so much more effectively. And for
Yeah.
me, that feels like, again, I'm not prognosticating, but I need to get prepared for that. I need to say, okay, then stop wishing for simple. Let those simple tasks be taken over through automation so that I can actually get excited about complex, because that's where the audience is, which means that's where the opportunity is. And let's get honest, that's where the money is. That's where you're going to earn your
Hmm.
pay, is figuring out how to solve complicated problems.
And I was thinking about this in relation to something I recently did on AI, which is helping me plan a trip to New York. Okay, I did that on AI. And I thought, okay, great. I'm having AI figure out where we should eat. And I've had to make some adjustments and do things, some show suggestions, things like that, right? And so a good question is, what is my role in this? Well, with this specific case, my role is to have a good time in New York and maybe make some high level decisions. That's it. That's my role, which is a great role, right? So I think it's always, what is my role based on what I can have somebody else do, and how can I elevate that role? Like what is going to be the part that can't be replaced? Well, no one else is going to spend time with my girls but me. So what's the part that is purely for you? And that's, I think, a really good way to reflect on your role.
I love the way you're framing this, Kathryn, because immediately you triggered in my mind an interview we had with our friend John Donnelly. John
Mhm.
came back from summiting Kilimanjaro and he shared the story with us. And one of the things he shared in the story was that when you're preparing to summit this particular mountain, you're actually preparing a series of base camp to another camp to another. In other words, you're working your way up the mountain, but as you do, you realize there's lots of peaks and valleys as you go. It's not just a straight
Mhm.
uphill climb. We in the industry today, your story of planning a trip to New York is you now have the capacity. It's like you've leveraged AI to get to a certain place on the mountain where now you can see, oh my gosh, this is going to allow me to go to the next level way differently than I would have known when I was back down at the base camp. But I had to get here to see this. And now you could focus on in-game questions like, what's the purpose of my trip? Why am I doing this? And you
Hmm.
can make that the main driver of your decisions. I think when I think about John's story and those elevations changing and undulating, the thing that changed was his vision. His view of what was ahead of him was different once he could see what was over that next ridge. You saw in planning a trip what's over the next ridge once you had this tool that could help you plan this thing out. And I hope that's what our audience is hearing today as well. If you're in the housing industry and you're thinking, oh my gosh, AI just came to take a chunk of my job away, I'm going to encourage you to expand that assumption to say, well, what part of your job did it take away?
Hmm.
And if it took away a part of it that really was very mundane and allowed you to do things that are much more interesting and maybe more important, frankly, than what it's able to do, start taking your vision into that next space. Start asking yourself, what happens after what happens next? Am I moving toward a version of growth now that I understand what it's capable of doing that allows me to do things differently that maybe I'd always hoped to do or dreamt of doing, but didn't think were possible because my job required all these mundane steps and I never really got around to doing the fun stuff, the interesting
Hmm.
stuff. I hope if we take the spirit of your New York planning and apply that same attitude into our business model, I'm hoping a lot of my clients are going to tell me my vision just expanded. What is possible today? I couldn't have even thought about 2 years ago because I didn't think it was possible. But now that I know it's possible, what's what happens after? What happens next? And I hope all of us, you, me, anyone that's attached to this industry, will see that, yeah, there are some dangers, but there are some opportunities as well. And let's don't minimize it. There are a lot of strengths. There are a lot of places to leverage. And as a coach, that's where I want to encourage you to spend time is let's leverage those strengths. Let's acknowledge that those opportunities might motivate us to dream and think differently with our vision. But if we're going to take action, leverage the strengths. You're never going to change the dangers because they're probably out of your control anyway. AI is here today, 47 seconds. They're doing it. So what does this make possible? I'm personally going to encourage us to lean into it and let's get excited about it.
I think that's a great way to look at it. And it's always, what can I control? What can I control? You can control your attitude about it. You can control your role. You can control what you learn. You can control how you influence others into what they decide to do. So I think there's certain pieces we can control, but there's a lot that we can't, and lean into those. What can I control?
That feels like a great way to button down this topic for today. I'm sure you and I are going to learn a lot more about this. You know, we're heading to the Housing Wire gathering that's going to be in Austin in late April. So, depending on the time you're listening to our episode, that may be just a few weeks down the pipeline. I want to encourage you, stick with us over the coming weeks because what Kathryn and I really are going to get excited about doing is looking ahead at some of the topics that we know are going to be on the agenda with some of the guests that we know that they've invited to talk about them. And we're going to start exploring some of the questions that we're going to be excited to go there and ask, the things we're going to want to learn about. We're going to share those with you. And the hope as we come back is that we will then have interacted because that's the point of the gathering. It's all that
Mhm.
interaction that happens in the forums and in the breaks and out in the at the lunch table, the breakfast table. Our hope is we're going to come back with not just some new ideas, maybe some answers to those questions we hadn't thought of, but maybe even some new guests, some folks that we can bring into the conversation that'll help us further that. Because that's always our goal with building bigger lives, is helping you to think about where you sit today, where you want to be in the future, and how to close that gap. So, Kathryn, thanks for spending time with me today on a CNBC article that came in over the weekend that seems like it's going to impact the trajectory in which we accelerate toward the use of AI in this particular area. And I want to lean into it. I want to be curious, and I appreciate you taking the time with me today.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, that's going to put a wrap on this episode of Building Bigger Lives. Please do tune in each and every Wednesday on the platform of your choice, whether you're on Audible, whether you're on Spotify or Apple. We are going to put a new episode in your inbox each week. Come and check it. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.